Hi, welcome to our What is a Good Mother Project channel. I'm Dr. Katie Ho, your host, author, and research principal investigator.
This is Genie Chu, your co-host on Undergraduate Research Apprentice.
In our What is a Good Mother Project channel, we will provide you with evidence from psychological theories and research to answer questions regarding the parenting effects. Our topic for today is how and why does parenting style matter? Presentation of the What is a Good Mother Project article number 1, Darling and Steinberg, 1993, Parenting Style as Context, an Integrative Model.
This presentation contains 7 sections: questions, intro, main thesis, processes, key findings, contributions, and unknown, which means questions raised and unanswered.
Darling and Steinberg integrated the meanings of parenting defined by previously published research prior to the 1990s into one conceptual model for others researchers to consider. Why did we choose to review a journal article published in the 1990s, that is 30 years ago? That's because we found that this review article by Darling and Steinberg has been a seminal paper that present-day researchers would cite when talking about the definition of parenting.
This is a proof of how important this paper is in the field of parenting and child development. That's why we made it our first article we reviewed on our channel. If you're interested in joining a What is a Good Mother project to voice out your opinion about what a good mother is, please click here to fill out our survey, which should take about 5 minutes.
Let's start with some questions. Have you heard of these terms, parenting practices and parenting style? Do you know what responsibilities modern-day parents should have? How does parenting style differ from parenting practices? What is parenting style? Why is it important to know?
Here's the citation of reference in the APA format for Darling and Steinberg's 1993 review article. It was published in the prestigious Psychological Bulletin Journal by the American Psychological Association, as known as the APA, with a very high impact factor of 17.3 in the present. When their paper was published, both Nancy Darling and Lawrence Steinberg were with the Department of Psychology at Temple University in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania.
Here are the main points of the article. Number 1, parenting style and parenting practices serve different functions and exert different effects on the child. Number 2, while parenting practices affect child outcomes, it is parenting style that enhances or impedes the effectiveness of parenting practices on the child, thus having an indirect effect on child outcomes, serving as the context.
In her research, Bowerman 1968 defined parenting style as the parent's values and beliefs about their roles as parents and about the nature of the child that drives them to naturally occurring patterns of affect, practices, and values when it comes to raising a child. So, according to Darling and Steinberg, the things that parents teach their children are referred to as parenting practices. For our commentary and application on this topic, please check out our Season 1, Episode 3 video.
Darling and Steinberg note that as early as the 1930s through the late 1950s, theories and researchers such as Baldwin, Olinsky, Schaefer, and Bell and Sittmans already defined parenting style by grouping particular practices conceptually into broader categories. For instance, they defined parenting style based on its potential to alter the child's emotional processes.
Later on, through factor analysis, correlated parenting practices or behaviors could be grouped to form a unifying factor, that is, a behavioral attribute. such as parental control, to describe a parenting dimension. For example, parenting behaviors that were likely to occur together included physical punishment, sanctions against aggression, and rules for the use of common living areas.
A quick commentary here. Nowadays, parenting practices would definitely include rules for using electronic devices such as pads and smartphones. According to Darling and Steinberg, developmental theorists such as Sittman's 1939 and Bowrand 1970 observed that children from authoritative family environments often exhibited instrumental competence. The term authoritative relates to the authority that the parents exercise over the child, so that the child can know how to behave in desirable ways in his or her social worlds.
And when parents were authoritative and have established an authoritative family environment, the kids are often socialized. That means well behaved or behaving in acceptable ways according to the standards of a particular society, cooperative, loyal, emotionally stable, cheerful, honest, not needing to lie to get away with punishment, straightforward, and dependable.
Bellram's 1968 described authoritative parents as valuing the expressive and instrumental attributes of their parental role and communication style. In other words, authoritative parents would encourage verbal give and take. That is to engage the child in two-way reciprocal communication, as opposed to using one-way command-like communication style. Moreover, these authoritative parents would share with the child the reasoning behind the policy and rules that they wanted the child to follow. In a nutshell, these parents act quite like a good teacher. They'd explain things to the kid. They would exercise their authority to set rules and regulations for the child to follow, and yet provide the child with a good amount of explanation and support to help the child achieve those rules and regulations, requirements, and demands.
In addition, authoritative parents valued both autonomous self-will of the child and disciplined conformity. While laying standards for the child to follow and achieve, authoritative parents would respect the individuality of the child, which means that the authoritative parents understand that not every child has the same abilities, temperament, and nature, and because every child is different, they would provide appropriate help and guidance for the child to attain the goals, while seeking to understand the child's unique interests in special ways. At times of parent-child divergence, they would not hem the child with restrictions, but respect the individual child's desires. Moreover, Bowron finds that parent socialization process is dynamic, which means that the kind of parenting style that the parent uses would actually alter the child's personality, such as how open the child is to parents' attempt to socialize him or her. In addition, the kind of parenting style that a parent would use does not depend on whether the child is compliant or not. Parents were found to use a particular style of parenting regardless of the child's compliance. Darling and Steinberg summarized the positive consequences of authoritative parenting as follows. First, authoritative parenting actually enhances the value of parental reinforcement. Second, authoritative parents' clear articulation of desired and prescribed prohibited behaviors enhances the children's ability to discern correct responses to parental demands and enhances the child's cognitive ability. Third, authoritativeness strengthens the parent's ability to act as socialization agents to the child.
Let me add a quick commentary here. We'll give examples of parental reinforcement and explain why it is important in shaping the child's behavior in our commentary and application video on this topic and article. So please click here to view our season 1, episode 3. So, to summarize the key findings of Darling and Steinberg 1993, here are the 4 elements, antecedent factors of child outcomes in Darling and Steinberg's integrative conceptual model. The first element is values and socialization goals of the parent, which are the worldviews and mentality of the parent about one's parenting role and responsibility. The second element is parenting practices, which are strategies and methods that the parent uses for developing specific child behavior and characteristics. According to Darling and Steinberg's conceptual model, the values and goals of the parents are the most fundamental driving force or antecedent factor of the parent's parenting practices. For example, of these goals that Darling and Steinberg listed include the child's development of social skills, appropriate manners, and academic abilities such as academic achievement, independence, and cooperation with peers, and the child's development of global qualities such as curiosity, critical thinking, spirituality, the capacity to experience joy and love, emotional intelligence, and emotional regulation. Here's an example provided by Darling and Steinberg on how parental goals and values led to the use of certain parenting practices. For instance, for the goal of developing positive self-esteem in the child, the parent would show interest in the child's activities by attending school functions with the child, asking about the child's friends, going to the museum with the child at the child's request, and so on. In addition, for the goal of enhancing the child's school achievement, the parent would make time for the child to do his or her homework, attend school functions, to inquire about grades, and more. In other words, the type of parenting practices that a parent uses on his or her child has a lot to do with his or her goal toward which he or she wants his or her child to develop and attain.
The third element is parenting style, which is a constellation of emotional attitudes towards the child that the parent displays across a wide variety of parent-child interactions. The fourth element is child's willingness/openness to be socialized, which is a characteristic or personality of the child. According to Darling and Steinberg, it is through these emotional attitudes towards the child, which is collectively referred to as parenting style, that children infer the emotional attitudes of their parents on them. These emotional attitudes of the parents towards the child are exhibited through the primary emotional processes shown in the parent, which are their tone of voice, body language, inattention, and bursts of temper. When the parents exhibit positive emotions interacting with the child infers that the parent like him or her and what he or she is doing. When the parents exhibit negative emotions interacting with the child infers that the parents dislike them or dislike what they're doing. Authoritative parents are those who are always seen showing positive emotions when interacting with the child, explaining things and guiding the child to attain their goals, and spending time with the child in a positively emotional way. Authoritarian parents, in contrast, may use bursts of anger to guide the child to obey their command. Authoritarian parents often use negative emotions to manipulate the child to comply with their demands with no explanation and guidance given to the child.
More importantly, positive attitudes, guidance, explanation, and two-way explanation style leads to the child becoming more open and cooperative towards the parent's choice of parenting practices. Thus, the child is more likely to attain the values and goals. In contrast, negative attitudes and emotions, inattention, and one-way communication style would lead the child to feel unloved. The more negativity of the parent perceived by the child, the more likely the child would disengage oneself from the parent's demands and develop gradually a rebellious personality, rendering any parenting practices ineffective. Daly and Steinberg's conceptual model displays 6 pathways or relationships between the 4 elements on child outcomes. First, there are 2 direct pathways 1 and 2, between parental goals and values and parenting style, and between parental goal and values and parenting practices. Parenting style and parenting practices are directly caused by the types of values and goals that the parent has about his or her role. In short, values and goals is the antecedent of parenting style and parenting practices. In other words, the values and goals that the parent holds determines the style in which he or she interacts with the child and the practices that he or she uses in raising the child.
Next, as illustrated in Pathway 4, parenting style is postulated to moderate, that is, change, the effectiveness of parenting practices on the child, that is, Pathway 3. For example, positive attitudes would lead to higher effectiveness of the parenting practices in shaping the child's behavior. Negative attitudes would lead to lower effectiveness of the parenting practices on the child. In other words, even as the parent uses a correct and appropriate strategy for shaping a specific child behavior, if the parent shows a negative attitude towards the child, the strategy would not work efficiently as expected.
Furthermore, as illustrated in Pathway 5, parenting style directly affects the child's personality, that is, openness and willingness to be socialized by the parents. Positive attitudes of the parents, such as warmth and autonomy support, lead to more openness and willingness to be socialized. Negative attitudes of the parents, such as rejection and coercion, lead to less openness and willingness to be socialized. Or to put it simply, more resentment and rebelliousness in the child. The more open and willing the child is to be socialized, that is to follow through the parents' expectations and obey the parents' suggestions or commands, the more effective the parents' strategies are in shaping the child's behavior. In contrast, the less open and willing the child is to be socialized by the parents, the less effective the parent strategies are. Thus, as illustrated in Pathway 6, the child's or the adolescent's willingness to be socialized moderates or changes the effectiveness of the parent's parenting practice. Dowling and Steinberg's model shows us that parenting style is all the more impactful than the type of parenting practices used.
To conclude, the main contributions of Darling and Steinberg's 1993 seminal review article includes first, the demonstration of the distinction between the definition of parenting style and the definition of parenting practices and their differential influences on the child. Specifically, parenting style directly influences the child's personality, that is, openness and willingness to be socialized by the parent. Parenting practices directly influence the child's outcome, that is, the child's behavior and characteristics. And the two interact with each other. That is, the degree to which parenting practices are effective in shaping the child's behavior depends on the style, namely the emotional attitudes of the parent towards the child that the parent uses on the child. Positive parenting style and attitude leads to higher effectiveness of the parenting practices used, and conversely, negative parenting style and attitudes leads to lower effectiveness of the parenting practices on the child.
Secondly, Jolly and Steinberg's model postulates that authoritativeness is the positive parenting style that enhances the effectiveness of parenting practices. For example, because of the positive attitudes and emotions, directional communicative style and autonomy support that the parents adopts to carry out his or her parental role, authoritative parents' parenting practices becomes more effective in shaping the child's behavior. In contrast with the lack of two-way communication and autonomy support plus negative attitudes and emotions that ignore and reject the child's ability, uniqueness, and potentials, the do what I say, and I know the best mentality. Authoritarian parenting practices becomes less effective in shaping the child's behavior. When the child in turn becomes less willing to comply with the command and is at risk of developing a rebellious personality.
While previous research before the publication of this review article demonstrated the nature of authoritative parenting, Darling and Steinberg raised the need to understand the processes in which authoritarian parenting may increase adolescents' resistance to parental advice. In fact, on our What is a Good Mother project channel, Season 1, we will review recent studies on the effect of the four parenting styles, namely authoritative, authoritarian, indulgent, and neglectful, on short-term and long-term child outcomes.
In our next episode, episode 2, we will review Garcia and Sarah's 2019 study entitled Raising Children with Poor School Performance, Parenting Styles, and Short-Term and Long-Term Consequences for Adolescents and Adult Development. In episode 2, through reviewing Garcia and Sarah's 2019 paper, we will demonstrate the definition of the parenting style in the 4 types of parenting style in detail, including the dimensions of parenting style. We will also demonstrate the kind of child outcomes that are related to parenting style. Meanwhile, a commentary and applications on this current topic and article is presented in our Season 1, Episode 3 video.
Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe to our channel, and fill out our What is a Good Mother project survey. Click here.
If you have any questions, let us know in the comments below. We would love to hear from you.